Hello and welcome. Today, I want to talk about something that is rampantly on the rise within the black male community. This silent assassin finds its way into our lives and, like a deadly parasite, sits and waits patiently for the right time to strike. Today, I want to talk about stress. So, what is stress? We know stress to be a natural reaction and response to life experiences, triggered by a wide range of factors. We even know there to be both bad and good stress. So, for example, some stress may help with alertness and motivation, as well as trigger fight or flight responses in certain situations. However, chronic and excessive stress can have significant negative impacts on our health and well being. And for whatever reason, this impact seems to be magnified almost twofold when talking in relation to black people. So I'm going to be focusing on the most common causes of stress. So, as you can see, that is things like financial concerns, relationship issues, as well as work related pressure. So, even just these three that I've just mentioned, we know that as black people, we're always going to be more subjected to these than, say, our non black peers. So let's first take a look at work related stress. You know, they've even got a black man out here looking stressed. But let's look at that. We know as black people, we're not going to get the same opportunities as other groups. I'm not here to bang on about that. So anyone who thinks that's a myth, then, you know, whatever in it. But this typically leads to us working lower paid jobs, more strenuous jobs, i.e., jobs where there's more physical exertion involved, which in itself will take a toll both physically and mentally on our well being. And even if you are fortunate to get a good paying, reasonably physically easy-ish job, we know for certain as a people we're likely to be on the bad end of weird office politicking and microaggressions, as well as everything else from pretty much everyone else. So over the years, terms like unconscious bias has come to be a thing. Obviously now renamed implicit bias, I think it is. And that has been something which has come into the workplace for employers and companies, organizations, you know, where a lot of training's involved, trying to educate people, educate I say in quotes. But let's be clear on what unconscious bias is. That is essentially just racism in the workplace. So whenever you actually hear those terms, implicit, unconscious bias, your mind should automatically translate that to racism. But being what that is, you know, the powers that be are always reluctant to use that term. So you can see, yeah, here we go. So they've renamed it now to implicit bias. I mean, we know what this is. This is just racism in the workplace. So here we're talking now about the various types of unconscious bias. So we've got affinity bias, halo horns effect. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what that is. Ageism, conformity bias, and all of these other sort of biases. But you know, if we was to scroll down this whole entire page and let's actually do a search for racism, you can see here, look, zero. So they are so reluctant to use the term or the phraseology racism, but we know that racism in the workplace is a real thing. So they've just renamed it unconscious bias. And being that we are black people and we are in the workplace, you know, we are going to be at the bad end of this kind of thing. So even here, when you look at some of the visualization here, this is not a representation of, the people who are going to be mostly affected by workplace racism or workplace bias. Even going onto the gov.uk website, you can see here again, look, it's all about middle-aged, with respect, middle-aged white women, who are not really going to be, I don't know what's going on here, what's this, X-Men or whatever, but, breaking the bias in the workplace, right? So, International Women's Day, again, so something that predominantly will affect black people. And I honestly believe that the whole unconscious bias thing and all this kind of stuff is just a pretty way for them to hide the fact that it's workplace racism, really. And again, it's been hijacked by these other groups, women's rights and whatever else. Let's be clear on what this is. So if they seem to be the visual representation of what's going on here, let's see, can we actually see, is there another hit for racism here? Again, so we've got 2 pages talking about unconscious bias and none of them want to talk about racism. So we've got things that I've never even heard of, but let's not talk about racism. So, this video is about stress. I'm actually getting stressed even just making this. But I guess it is what it is, isn't it? So coming back here to taking a deeper look at some of the work-related stress, because, we already know what that looks like in the workplace, but here we can see the common sort of challenges and what that actually feels like for an individual who's having to deal with work-related stress. So feeling withdrawn, again, if you're in an office of a bunch of people who don't look like you, or, you might lose your drive and motivation, your self-confidence, because a lot of the stuff that happens with these microaggressions can always affect us in terms of our confidence. If you're not a person who's strong in your own self, if you're not a person who knows your own self, these little microaggressions and these little tricks and games that you might have to encounter in the workplace, whether it be on a building site or in an office space, it's all the same. This can actually have an effect on your confidence, and again, on your emotional reactions, because they always want to, quote unquote, draw us out, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking to draw you out as a black man or black female, to be that stereotype kind of angry black person, so they're always trying to, quote unquote, trigger you, so, I like to think we're never going to be tearful, but in a lot of situations we might come across as sensitive or aggressive because we're having to deal with things which other people aren't having to deal with. So, here, jumping to conclusions, here they're giving suggestions on, how people, and this isn't specific to any black people, I'm just looking at what they're saying are common signs and symptoms of work-related stress, and how I'm just giving examples of, what we're going to have to deal with in relation to microaggressions and what we're experiencing in these places, and why I think that it's going to affect us more so than anybody else. So it gives some suggestions such as, without jumping to conclusions, or don't jump to conclusions without considering the facts. But how many times do we find ourselves as black people in the workplace where other people have actually jumped to conclusions without considering the facts, or people automatically jumping to the worst case scenario. So it's quite telling that actually they've got what they are listing as changes to thinking patterns, but actually these are things which are being excised on us. So it's very strange. Again, possibly related to some of the financial related stress that we're going to touch on in a sec. We're going to have to work longer hours because a lot of the times the normal hours for one job might even not be enough. So if we're not given the opportunity to do overtime, we might even find ourselves working second jobs. That's more so us than anybody else. And, working through holidays is normal. And again, they're saying that this is common behavior changes. We don't have time to take extra time off. That's a myth for us. The ability for us as black people to take extra time off work is more a luxury than it is anything else, really. Anyway, let's move on to financial concerns. So here they're talking about money worries and how it's connected to our mental health. So worrying about money can affect our mental well-being, etc., etc. We know that. So really, a lot of this are points that tie in with work-related issues, i.e., low pay, etc. But again, because we as black people, being on the bottom of the socio-economic ladder, it comes with its own unique challenges. So if you're tying in financial concerns in relation to things like housing, for example, we know as black people, the rate of black home ownership is pretty much bad, isn't it, really? We're at the bottom of the scale in relation to other groups. That being what that is, it means that we're more likely to be renting, and that in itself comes with a lot of stress, having to deal with potential rent increases, the instability that comes along with that, or really just being able to find somewhere to rent in the first place can be a challenge in itself. Letting agents, they don't take well to us, and that's pretty much the same deal with some landlords. So, and do you know, as a matter of fact, that's brought to mind something, which actually reminds me, sorry, hold on for a sec. Yeah, sorry about that. Mentioning all that brought to mind this article that I remember seeing some years back, which is actually quite relevant to what I'm saying about what we as a people have to experience. So here the BBC went undercover to expose some of the racial prejudices that we as a people have to experience when it comes to housing. It's a relatively short clip, 1 minute 30, so I'll just let it play.
I'm undercover in a flat, posing as a landlord. These are some of the many agents the BBC discovered were willing to select tenants for landlords by race.
Without openly advertising it that, no Afro-Caribbeans allowed, we would obviously, understand that it's not available.
So just in case, because I don't know what the audio, I'm hoping you can actually hear that. So what's actually happening here is there's an agent, there's a landlord who's not really a landlord. He's an undercover BBC reporter pretending to be a landlord. And he's had these two chaps come over from a letting agent to give him an evaluation of how much per calendar month they can expect to receive if they were to rent it out via their agency. So the landlord or the undercover agent has kind of said to them, look, we don't really want anyone who's not a white person, or we don't want any black people, I think is actually what he said, right?
By race.
Now listen to what he's about to say, because this seems to be something that is quite normalized. The way they've handled what the undercover reporters said, they seem to get this sort of thing all the time, right? So
openly advertising it that, no Afro-Caribbeans allowed, we would...
Smiling as well when he says it. So he's saying, without openly advertising no black Afro-Caribbeans allowed...
Obviously, understand that it's not available.
We would obviously, he says, just have to say that it's not available.
The Race Relations Act outlawed discrimination in services in England, Scotland and Wales, such as adverts stopping black people renting houses. Today, it may be more subtle.
You basically just put it on the system that no Caribbeans for this property, so that when somebody comes in, they won't basically advise them of this property being available.
Now, would any of them do it in practice?
Jeez. So, that's crazy. So this is another letting agency. So this guy's actually saying we will actually pull it on the system, I think is what he just said.
Services in England, Scotland and Wales, black people renting houses. Subtle.
You basically just put it on the system, and now Caribbeans for this property. Just put it on the system, and now Caribbeans for this property.
So we'll just put it on the system, basically. And look how nonchalantly he's just saying that, shrugging his shoulders. Yeah, we'll just put it on the system. No blacks allowed on the no for this property. So basically, he's saying on the agency computer system, we'll just put it in no black people. So if a black person sees an advert for that property, the people working there, can you imagine that? Now that I'm actually saying this, can you imagine that? The people actually working there will see that, and they would not rent it out if the person who's inquiring about it is a black person. So we're talking here about financial stress, but this ties into what we spoke about before, work-related pressure. So what if you're actually a black person who's even working in that sort of environment where you know, look, I can't rent this out to another black person? How does that make you feel? What does that do to your self-esteem? Or would a place like this even hire a black person, you know? Crazy.
That when somebody comes in, they won't basically advise them of this property being available.
Now, would any of them do it in practice? Two researchers, one black, one white, will try to get a viewing on a flat we've put on the market. At this agency, our white researcher gets an appointment straight away.
It's Tuesday.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Tuesday's fine, yeah.
But when our black researcher asks to view the same flat, definitely still available.
It's already gone. Do you know if there's going to be any viewings at all?
No, it's already.
No. It's just gone. I mean, like, that's crazy. Like,
To view the same flat,
so let's.
way. Researcher gets an
So the white
appointment
guy's
straight
coming in now to inquire about said property. Look at him. He's off his feet.
away.
Big smile on his face. Look at him.
It's Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, look at him.
Tuesday's fine, yeah.
But when our black researcher
Black
asks to
guy
view the
comes
same
in.
flat,
Look at his face. Why does he look confused? You're in a letting agency. A guy's coming, inquiring about a property, and this guy looks confused. He looks like, right, like, what are you doing in it? He's trying to rent a property. So this is what it's like for us. That look at his face. Like, he looks confused as to why somebody is inquiring about a property inside an estate agent's. Bonkers.
definitely still available.
It's already gone. Do you know if there's going to be any viewings at all?
No, it's already.
Look at him. No. It's gone.
The sort of practices we've seen displayed in the programme are not only worrying, they're absolutely disgraceful, they are unlawful, and they need driving out.
We asked the agents you saw why they were prepared to break the law. None responded.
On the run, you know.
This
Locked-
one refused
it's
to
all
open the
locked, you know,
doors when he
crazy.
saw us arrive.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question, please? Could you come and talk to us?
And look at this rat scurrying in the back. Crazy.
Please? And we found many more prepared to act in the same way. Guy Lynn, BBC News.
And you know, I wasn't
going
gonna say it.
in the same way.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question, please? Could you come and talk to us, please?
And I wasn't going to say it, but I am going to say it, right? So, you know, this seems to be common practice, right? Up and down the country, where a lot of letting agents won't even give black potential tenants the chance to even view properties. When I was searching for this, like, there were multiple hits that came up for things that I'd not even seen. And this is only 2023, right? So racism makes it harder for me to rent. And even this is nuts. Look, landlords to receive anti-racism and hate crime training, because landlords are actually saying, look, I don't want black people in my house. Crazy. So they don't even care about the color of your money. The color of your skin is more important, right? So this is what we're actually having to deal with, right? And, you know, coming back to this dude here, right? These people, they don't even know anything about the potential tenants' affordability, right? So, i.e. what they earn, what they do for a living, etc. You can see how blasé and how cool they are telling the landlord, who actually, unfortunate for them, is an undercover agent. Yeah, if blacks come through, we're just telling the place is gone. The other guy, this guy is even saying, we got a system for this, you know? So I myself, I've experienced this before. And, you know, not to sidetrack, but this is an example of why I hold some of the views I shared in the BAME video that I uploaded. you know. And although at the time of making this, that video still had 0 views, but in that video I spoke about us as black people being all that we have, right? So forget all the BAME or BME, black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and all of the people of color talk, yeah? Because this video shows, quote, people of color, because this will be considered a person of color discriminating against us as other people of color. So, do you know what I mean? Like, miss me with all of that holding hands, we're all one, because that's all BS, okay? These people, yeah, they're only with us when it benefits them. And another thing to realize as well, or another thing I should actually mention, is the undercover reporter in this instance is a white man. So he's not even an Asian man like what this guy seems to be. He's not even an Asian man, he's a white guy. So they have that understanding that even outside of BAME, they're willing to pander to the white people's concerns of black people because they feel the same and even worse. You know, a lot, like I said in that BAME video, a lot of hatred, blatant, brazen racism that I've actually experienced have been from non-white groups. Like I said in that video, you know, I've never had anyone from any white establishment actually say to me, you can't come in here because of the color of your skin. They'll always make up some stupid excuse like, oh, you don't have the right shoes, you don't have the right shirt. I've been places up and down this country where I've had people from South Asian descent literally say, you know, you guys can't come in here because you're black, and be very brazen about it. So I thought that was worth mentioning. And, you know, we're talking about the financial side of things. There were a number of other things that I wanted to talk about, but like I said before, just making this video is kind of stressing me out. So I'm not even going to bother touch on those kind of things. But, you know, if we can't even find places to live, we can only imagine the kind of stress, worry, anxiety, this kind of stuff is putting on us. Forget about our mood. It's gone through the floor right now. We're going to be, of course, massively depressed about these kind of things. Not even talking about money right now. You know, if you've got to go back to your missus and you can't even say to her, look, I've found a place for us to stay, she's going to be looking at you like you're just worthless, you know? So what does that do to your self-esteem? You know, what does that do to feelings of guilt or shame, you know? Let alone sleep problems. Right, so that's enough on the financial side of things. We can't even find places to live, even with the crappy wages that we're getting, right? So let's move now on to... Actually, I've got one that isn't on this list. So initially, we was looking at work pressure and financial issues, and we're going to talk about relationship issues. But another thing that I actually wanted to talk about was diet. So, diets. A lot of the foods that we're used to coming from the backgrounds that we're coming from, both African and Caribbean, are just straight dangerous, right? No matter how good they might taste, right? There's a whole leap of issues with a lot of the food that we're used to eating in relation to salt and saturated fat content. You know, a lot of the times they tend to be very starchy, and you know, because we tend to eat a lot of white rice, yams, and whatever else, you know, all of which can lead to high cholesterol levels. So this is something that I've been noticing, or something that came to my awareness a few years back when I went myself for a cholesterol test, and unfortunately it came back and actually said that I had high cholesterol. I've since been able to manage that and get that under control. You know, I'm not obese or anything like that. I'm actually in pretty good physical shape. But, you know, having a look at that and being a bit more aware of my food consumption is, you know, what led me to realize that there is a correlation between what we are eating as black people and things like hypertension and blood pressure and stuff like that. So you can hear I'm on Blood Pressure UK, and they're talking about how potentially your ethnic background can affect your blood pressure, and you know, in worst case scenarios leading to strokes or heart attacks. So it goes on to talk about what is high blood pressure, how to lower that. But it's talking about things like cutting down on salt, and it's mentioning here traditional African, Caribbean, and South Asian dishes tend to be high in salt, which raises your blood pressure. Right, the more salt you eat, the higher your blood pressure will be. Right, and this is very important, this line here, because this is something that I've actually seen, and I've seen medical research in relation to this, where it says people of African Caribbean descent, so people of black descent, are more sensitive to the blood pressure raising effects of salt compared with other ethnic groups. So please understand that. That means that yes, blood pressure, salt does raise everybody's blood pressure, but for whatever reason, it has an adverse effect to us, magnified by that in relation to any other group, and again, it's even saying this. It's saying why it isn't fully understood, but this is what we need to be aware of. And when you look at the numbers, in relation. So here I'm looking at a chart. This is the digital NHS UK data, and here we're talking about the prevalence of hypertension amongst adults by ethnic group. So here we're at the top of the list. So at housing we're at the bottom of the list, but here we're at the top of the list. Look, black African, and then where's black Caribbean? Yeah, right at the top, right? So we're at the top for the wrong things, we're at the bottom for the wrong things, right? So I don't want to see us in these sort of places anymore. And even when you're looking at the grey line, that's age standardized, so we can see that we're not even talking about seriously old age type situations. You can see that median there. It's not a good look for us. It really isn't a good look for us, so this is something that we need to be aware of. And coming back here, I like this page, actually, this website. They've got a lot of good information in relation to how, for example, you can have alternatives to salt, such as herbs and spices, chilies and whatever else. Not everything's got to be salt or stock cubes. You can try, have the missus or whoever's cooking right, to try other things. And another thing is, as well as that, is cutting down on the fat, right? Here, I found this quite funny. They had this list on meals to look out for, right? So they had a lot of Caribbean dishes on here. I don't know why they've not got any African dishes, any Nigerian. There's no jollof is missing from this list, but it probably should be on here as well. I'm sure that because especially in Nigerian cooking, there's a lot of cooking that gets done with palm oil, which you might as well just be drinking petrol poison, because that is a straight killer, yeah. But here, they've got a list of foods that apparently, according to them, we need to look out for. I don't want to see a world where there is no brown stew chicken. I love brown stew chicken, so I don't want to see a world where that doesn't exist anymore. They've got a bunch of all these other things, like jug pudding. I've never heard of that, but that sounds like a straight killer. I love pepper pot soup. They got a bunch of things down here. Saltfish and ackee, I've no idea what that is. I guess they're talking about ackee and saltfish, for crying out loud. Please get it right. But yeah, again, even more tips on cutting down, using less salt, and just being aware of fat and our nutritional content, would go a long way, or it does go a long way. Something else that is really handy, or at least it makes my life much more easier, is a lot of the new food labeling that we have across food products sold, especially in supermarkets. But a lot of things that you're going to pick up off the shelf are going to have these new kind of food labels, where it's an easy read of a lot of the nutritional information. I say nutritional, a lot of the stuff that we're even buying doesn't have any nutritional substance to it at all. But a lot of what you can see, total fat, saturated fat, sugars and salts, we've now got this new RAG system, red, amber and green, sort of color-coded traffic light styly system. So something like this you would see on almost anything that you're going to pick up on the main supermarkets and even your corner shops, right? So here, like, I don't really take too much consideration into the energy sort of kilojoules and stuff like that. Like, I'm not too concerned about that. Anything amber, I mean, anything red, yeah, I'm not even, if I pick it up and it's red, I'm just dashing that straight on the floor. Yeah, someone's going to have to pick that up. But amber, depending on what the amber is, if it's a sugar that's amber, maybe I might take it. But even that, with the sugars as well, is it a natural sugar or is it an added sugar? Because a lot of added sugars are actually really bad for us. Again, as black people, they seem to negatively affect us than more so than other groups. But this is an easy thing that you can see. So here you can see whatever this would be would have 0.7 grams of salt, and that's a lot. That's a lot. The recommended level of salt, I think it's something around along the lines of 6 grams. So knowing, like I said previously, or like it was mentioned on the Blood Pressure UK website, how salt negatively impacts us more as black people, we should be aiming for 3 grams of salt. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen a pair of digital scales before. If you put 3 grams, weigh up 3 grams on some digis, yeah, and see what that actually looks like. You're taking that in salt. Now, imagine what their recommended daily allowance is, 6 grams, right? Now, this is almost a gram, you might as well say, give or take 0.3. This is a gram of salt, whatever this could be. So this could be a packet of crisps. And I actually saw a situation, because as I said, I got my cholesterol levels back. So now every single thing I pick up, I'm looking at it, I'm trying to work out how much salt it is, etc., etc. Maryland cookies, like, they literally had, each cookie was like 9 grams of sugar. Like 9 grams condensed in one cookie. And I used to smack like a whole packet of those like every day. That would just be normal. And as I said, I'm not a big guy. Like, I'm like 13 stone at my heaviest. Right, so I fluctuate between 12 and 13 stone, right? And just everything, like, after I got my results, when I first went to the supermarket, I found that everything that I was used to buying, I had to just put it back on the shelf. I picked it up, I looked at it, and I was like, I can't believe I was eating that. It's only the Lord that's actually saved me from actually passing out at my relatively youngish age, you know? So let's be a bit more aware of stuff like that. So, as it says here, front of pack nutrition labels, I mean, you don't need me to spell it out. Red means high, amber medium, green is low, right? You know, reference intakes, ingredients list, you know, and it's got some tips as well here. So, you know, whenever you got a chance, probably visit here. And so that's NHS, Live Well, you know, and have a look at some of their food guidelines and stuff. Moving on, lastly on my list, I wanted to take a look at relationships and how that ties into our mental health and well-being. So this is a bit of a tricky one, especially coming from the black perspective, right? We all know that there's a massive gender war, which, if I'm honest, I don't actually really subscribe to myself. Right? I think it's something that's actually being pushed on us as a black people, and it just creates a massive divide between us brothers and our black sisters, you know, and especially with the younger lot, you know, I actually feel sorry for them, because I'd hate to be, say, in my early 20s, having to deal with the dating market as it is, and the expectations that some of these sisters are having right now. But at the same time, I'm not 100% convinced that these crazy whack jobs that I'm seeing right now everywhere online are in fact a real representation of what's out there, or is it just what's being pushed and promoted as the quote unquote representation of black femininity? You know, I say that because you know how they like to do us dirty with false representations, you know. With that said, I mean, look at some of this stuff. I mean, she actually looks all right. What's about to happen here? Yeah, I mean, this is nuts. I mean, they're all squaring off, and it's just, what's going on here? Like, and, you know, I mean, these two, I mean, what are we looking at here? These guys, I mean, they just come out of jailhouse. with the plastic bags and like it just looking like absolute smackheads. So obviously, this I get. These are caricatures. This is the extreme side of what I'm talking about, right? I don't personally ever come into contact with any kind of sisters or females who, even in my younger days, who act or behaved in any of this kind of way. But it's important for my sisters. I'm going to speak directly to you. Please understand that you have to be aware that mainstream media pushes out a very negative opinion of us as black men, and it happens with you as sisters too. And although these clips that I'm showing, this isn't mainstream media, this is social media. Everywhere when I'm looking at black women, I seem to see this kind of view of you guys, and it's not really a good look. And I know, and I like to at least have the hope that this isn't a real representation of who you are. Another thing that's become commonplace, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this, is this thinking that black women are somehow doing better than us black men, right? And first, I'd like for us to understand that this is actually incorrect, right? Black women are doing better than black men, but that's only in relation to employment and not in relation to net value. So here, this is a site that I like looking at a lot of the time. That's Black Demographics. And although it's not UK based, because unfortunately for us, gov.uk doesn't give us good aggregations in relation to ethnicity as well as sex in a lot of what I like to look at. But you can see here that in relation to employment, right, here in terms of management, there are 839,000 black women, and compare or contrast that to the 694 black men in positions of management, right? So here in this, looking at this table here, you can see that, black women are forging ahead. So a lot of talking points that you will see, especially on social media, is these women who are getting these jobs and they think that somehow, they're doing better than men, etc., etc. But, women need to understand something, that this is in relation to employment, not in relation to, net value. Again, here we're talking about who earns what, right? So again, in relation to employment, right? When we're talking about earnings, in actual earnings, we can see that black men, when they are getting paid, they're getting paid more than the black women. But again, looking back here, we can see that the total numbers of those employed, we as black men are falling behind our sisters. And that's okay, right? That's okay, because what a lot of sisters need to understand is that is actually engineered, right? The system and the powers that be, their goal is to create that divide, to create an imbalance in the power dynamic of the home, where you have a situation where the woman is actually earning more or in a better financial position than the man, right? Which, maybe call me a traditionalist. I don't necessarily feel that any one sex should have a more of a financial stronghold than the other, but this is what we get a lot of the time. It is targeted against us. We get situations where we as black men, we're not getting those opportunities. And, I spoke about that right at the beginning. We're just not getting those opportunities. So they'd sooner give those opportunities to black women, because it further pushes their agenda of creating this imbalance in the power dynamic of the home. But when you start to look at who actually has a net worth, like whose net worth is higher, you will actually see, as it says here, black women typically have a lower net worth when compared to black men. Why is that? That's because one of the things that they like to take away from all of these statistics, like who's employed, blah, 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 occupation and all this kind of stuff, is a lot of us as black men, we are actually self-employed, right? So we know those of us that are smart enough, right, or a lot of us that are smart enough to know and see that this is being done to negatively impact us and our family structure, we go out and we create our own businesses, right? And we're willing to take the risk in relation to that. And some of us, we're willing to do illegal things, right? We're going to go and get it any way how, right? We're not going to be confined to poverty if we're physically able to go and do something, whether it be legal or illegal, right? So just because you're getting jobs, and jobs that otherwise your black partner might not be getting, don't think that you're better than him. So please, sisters, it's really good that you're in a position of strength when it comes to work related employment, and that's good. But understand, even things like this, as you can see here, again, this isn't UK based, but I'd be surprised if it's any different here. But here you can see a single black man's median wealth is 10,000 in comparison to a single woman's median wealth, which is 1,700. And we know that, not to be overly, not to be stereotypical or anything like that, but we know that women tend to be consumers way more than men are. Right, so the notion of saving for a rainy day, this kind of thing, I'm not saying women don't do that. Of course they do that, especially coming from our backgrounds. We all have grandparents and our grandmas, our nanas who taught us how to save, or I like to think that anyway. But let's keep it real. A lot of times women are more prone to spending, spontaneous spending, more so than men are. So you can see this is nearly tenfold in relation to what women have in terms of their average wealth. So I say that to you, sisters. Yes, the man and the powers that be give you those opportunities, and yes, you might find yourself in these good positions of employment, whether it be management, etc., etc. But please understand that this is engineered, right, to create this distortion, to create this imbalance in your mind where you actually end up looking down on your partner. And if we go back to some of the initial stress factors that we were talking about, right, this plays into that. So I just want you to bear that in mind. I purposely left the whole discussion about relationships and how it relates to our stress, particularly from a black perspective. I've left this last because, I just don't want to play into this whole gender war thing with the sisters. It's not what my intention is. I want to make content for smart, intelligent people, who I believe to be the vast majority of us as black people, right? But I have to tiptoe on this subject because I don't want to do this whole, black sisters, you're not doing better than us and we're doing better. That's just not what I'm trying to do. But please understand, the power that you have as feminine beings and what you bring to the home, and I'm saying that because as black men, we are always going to be dealing with so much BS outside of the home that when we come back into the home, it really needs to be a stress-free environment where we can actually recharge, relax, and basically reconfigure ourselves both physically and mentally. So the constant BSing about, whatever, it really doesn't help. And again, I'm not saying that this is your fault, and at the same time, this isn't a green card for you waste brothers, you waste guys who you take the BS at work. And this happens, and I've seen this happen, you take all the BS at work without even having a spine to stand up to it in the office, but then you come back home or on the building site or wherever you work, and then you come back home acting like a tyrant, oppressing your family, especially your women. I've got no support for such individuals, and this isn't a green light to you, but please, sisters, again, my message to you is understand what we're going through. You should be able to know the difference between a guy who's just whatless and a guy who's actually trying to make things happen. No matter of what his income is, just think about his hours. What time is he putting in? It's not his fault if he's not getting the maximum dollar or the maximum pound amount for his time, but just know, is he actually putting in that time, or is he not even putting in that time? You know, understand the war that they've created, the powers that be have created for us as black people for decades now, and the division that they're trying to create in between us. And know, please just know, if there's anything I can say today, just know one thing, yeah, and that is, if we are not as black men going to love and protect you, then with respect, I don't know who else is, you know, and believe me on that, you know, we don't need to be going back and forth about silly things. And, you know, just to close on this particular point, you know, I once had a partner who actually refused to stop putting salt in my food, you know. So as I mentioned my cholesterol levels, etc., I had said to her, and actually it was before I actually got these cholesterol tests done, actually, I was already aware of salt intake, and I had asked this particular female not to put salt in my food, you know. And what she would say to me is, you know, my nana, my mum cooked it this way, so I'm going to continue to cook it this way. If you want a woman who cooks it differently, go marry her. All this kind of nonsense, you know. And we argued about it many times, and it got to the point where I actually just had to say to her, you know what, I'm cooking my own food. And that's exactly what I was doing. I just started cooking my own food. And, you know, needless to say, I once had a partner who refused to stop putting salt in my food because, yeah, she had to go, you know. And, you know, flipping back to the bros, like, don't take no silliness when it comes to, you know, if you find yourself having silly disagreements, especially if they're over your health. You know, if you find yourself going back and forth over things like, you know, in my case, it was not putting salt in food. And you can see we touched about, you know, nutrition and diet and how, you know, that affects us more so than anyone else as black people. If you're going back and forth with some woman over anything, it might not even be food related. You know, a lot of people, they like to stand wrong and strong over foolishness, you know. So if you find yourself with one of those women, just know that she cares more about being right than your health. So you just need to leave ASAP. In closing, I wanted to share let's just call it a high-level checklist of things that I've been doing, some of which I've only just started, I must say. You know, that's helped me be able to deal with stress. Because again, when I come on here and we look at the NHS guidelines and stuff, a lot of this isn't specific to black people. So, I mean, we all know what stress is and how it can affect us. But my checklist, what I would leave you guys with, this is what I want to share. So firstly, and this is a must, right? Blood cholesterol. Please, male, female, all of us, we need to get our blood cholesterol tested, right? It's a very simple process. This will measure both the good and bad cholesterol levels which are in your bloodstream, right? And that's actually really important. So we've got the good HDL cholesterol, and although it's not on this page, it's the bad LDL cholesterol that needs to be measured, and that needs to be watched out for, because that's the stuff that can actually block your arteries, your heart arteries, and lead potentially to strokes and even worse, heart attacks. So please get that tested. It's a very easy process. They can either take it from your arm, or you can just get a quick finger prick test. So either way, it's a very easy process, and there's no real reason for you not to get that done. Secondly, sort of ties into like what we've spoken about in relation to diet. It's actually exercise. I didn't speak about it too much. Just getting some basic exercise. So even if you're not a member of a gym, I found these, you know, with the crazy costs of gym memberships right now. Yeah, I mean, I am actually a member of the gym now, but you know, I got myself a set of these, which are actually quite handy. I actually got super buff using these. You know, you can just have these anywhere in the home. You know, just aim for, I don't know, like 100 a day. You know, just get yourself a set of these push-up stands and a skipping rope. You know, and to be fair, this is probably one of my best or this is in fact the best fitness purchase I've ever made. You know, you don't need a lot of room. As I said, just start by aiming for 100 push-ups a day and reps of 20. You know, even now I can do, in a single rep, I could do like 50 to 60 of these, you know, and that's real talk. I mean, these got me absolutely hench. You know, the only reason why I even got a gym membership in the end was because the top half of my body was looking so bolo but I had these mad chicken legs. So I had to go to the gym to work on my legs so that my body was all in, you know, proportion and that, you know. As well as that, you know, I find it quite hard to do leg exercises at home. So to get my body in proportion, I had to do that, you know. And, you know, I'm a man, I prefer to work out at home, you know, away from other people. You know, it's kind of crazy in the gym right now, you know. It's all packed, all these women doing all kinds of splits all over the place, man. It's mad. As well as that, walking always helps, you know. So I'm walking outdoors, aim for like 2 to 5 miles a day without the headphones. I'd even suggest without the headphones. Just get outside, enjoy the nature, you know, the breeze, the birds and all of that. And I mean the birds that are flying, you know, not the other birds, you know. It do wonders for your mental health, you know, especially if you are unfortunately dealing with spousal issues or, you know, issues with your partner at home, you know. Get outside, man. You know, don't make your house a prison. And that's going for the sisters too, you know. And thirdly, we did touch in detail about the diet and stuff like that, you know. We've got the food labeling. We got the food labeling now. So, you know, your sugars and your salts and your saturates, they have to go. You know, at the very least, they should be reduced and monitored. And by monitored, you know, we've now got this labeling system. So, you know, just picking up things off the shelves without checking their nutritional content, you know, there's no excuse for that anymore, you know. It's really easy for us to use these labels to see what we're actually purchasing. So, as well as that, you know, just stay strong, man. Just understand, both brothers and sisters, we're dealing with a lot of things that a lot of other groups don't have to do, but we're still here, man. Like, do you know what I'm saying? We're still here. We're still not cracking under the pressure. And you know what I'm saying? We're going to make it happen. So, brothers, be strong with your women. Well, not be strong with your women, not in that way, but be strong for your women. And, you know, sisters, please be strong for us as well, innit? Yeah, that's it. So thanks to everyone for your time. If you would like to share your own personal experience of dealing with stress or anything else related to this video, please feel free to comment and share. Engagement is always welcome. Peace.